If everything goes right today, I'll get these graded and put in gradebook before end of the school day, so you'll know what's going on, and then you'll get them back. So shouldn't take too long. So tomorrow's the 24th. You'll figure it out. I mean, you only spend 2 periods in this room.
Yeah.
You know.
I can still do that.
It's crazy. All right, so yesterday we were running through different kinds of arguments that you could potentially use within essay. Remember, you're not limited to the ones that we were coming up with. And so if you were talking to, mentioning a whole bunch of people who are like 7th period AP, you could talk to them. They might have a different set of arguments that we came up with yesterday as opposed to yours. Obviously, both sets would work fine, so you're not limited to any particular one. Then we ran through a whole bunch of literary devices with the diddles. These are not by any means the only literary devices that you can use, but it's a nice place to kind of start at the beginning of the year because you can just think of the acronym mnemonic device diddles. Did anyone tell parents at home that you learned diddles?
Oh, my mom asked me what I did yesterday. Although someone made a joke about the name of the book Great Surprise, they said the sequel was Raisins of Anger.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a bad joke. So sad on that.
Especially after the Dust Bowl. I mean, grapes wouldn't last very long. Any questions about any of these devices as opposed to what they are? We're okay, we're okay, we're okay. One of these you cannot use in your essay. And it's not details. I'll let you use it. I know I said yesterday it's not my favorite, but it is appropriate for the book. But one of these on here I don't want you to use at all. Ever. Any idea why?
It's too easy.
Oh, there's too many options.
Too broad. Now, Anna could use metaphor, symbolism, and allusions in her essay. And each paragraph, metaphor, one paragraph, symbolism, another paragraph, allusions, another paragraph. But I don't want her or anyone else saying, I'm going to use figurative language, and then in your examples in that paragraph, you have a simile, and then you have a metaphor, and then you have like a motif, because it's going to be too broad. So you can certainly use examples of figurative language, but I don't want you using the term figurative language as one of your rhetorical devices. But it's easier to say diddles and no figurative language as opposed to saying did some at the end. So you can use types of figurative language. Your whole entire essay, you could use 3 separate types of figurative language, and I'm okay with that. But I just don't want you using figurative language as a term and then have 3 different types going on. If you use figurative language as a term and you only have one type of figurative language in that paragraph, then you may as well just simply call it what type of figurative language you're using, and so the term figurative language in itself becomes kind of silly anyway. Right? So those are certainly options you can use, but you would be finding multiple examples of irony, multiple examples of a metaphor, should you choose to focus on one of those types of figurative language. So that part at least kind of makes sense. Katie, did you say diction as the one not to use?
I was just going to say.
Somebody said,
I did,
but
yeah.
okay. In a way, you're kind of right. You can use diction, and I don't think I mentioned this yesterday. You can use diction, but I want you to add something to it. Because again, what's the problem with saying Steinbeck uses diction?
It's a lot of words.
You just use
Yeah.
words.
There's 161,000 words in the book, so there's a lot of words that you could pull from. What would be a way to narrow down diction? But what kind of part of speech in front of the word? If I want to describe, or I could put an adjective. So rather than going, he uses diction, you would go, he uses demeaning diction, derogatory diction. He uses unifying diction, if you're talking about how families are coming together. So all of your examples within that paragraph would be a specific type of diction. So for, and I know I'm jumping ahead, I have dreamed Martin Luther King. He's speaking in Washington, D.C. He's talking to all the people. There's going to be some inspiring diction. There's going to be some patriotic diction that's being used. So as long as you can describe the type of diction, then you would be okay.
So if we still choose to use figurative language, but let's just say we use like motifs, are we also still allowed to use something like imagery as well, or do we just have to stick with what's in the figurative language category if we choose that?
For the essay as a whole, you're going to choose 3.
Okay.
So yes, you could still use like motif and imagery, but they would be in separate paragraphs.
Okay. Gotcha.
Does that answer the?
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if you were just had to use what was considered figurative language
No.
if you chose that.
No.
Okay.
I mean, if you use, I guess, I don't know, I might be confusing myself now. Like if you're going to, if you want to do figurative language, you're going to choose some type of figurative language that you're going to write about. You know, you said like motifs. So I would have in a paragraph, I'm solely focusing on motifs that are helping to get my argument across.
Gotcha.
I'm going to show you how to set it up with a thesis statement. I could have in a separate paragraph examples of imagery that are helping to get that across.
Okay.
But there's no reason why they would be like mingling together in the same paragraph. What theoretically could happen, and what probably will happen, chapter 5, there's a pretty dominant extended metaphor in relation to the bank. Refer to it as a monster. You might write about it as a metaphor. Someone might write about it as a symbol. You could even have some imagery, potentially coming in. So depending upon the other examples that you're using, you could be looking at a similar part of the book. You might be writing about imagery. Someone might be writing about metaphor, depending upon how you're using the words and all that kind of stuff. So in that way, you could kind of have some back and forth, but you're going to choose one for each paragraph. Yeah, go on to no. Any other questions with that? Now, for the diction, talk about having an adjective. I don't want you choosing 3 different types of diction. So if you go with diction in a body paragraph, you're only doing one type of diction. Katie's not going to write about Steinbeck uses unifying diction, and then another paragraph of derogatory diction. You're going to the well a little too many times. The figurative language, they're separate enough from one another that you would be okay. Now, if in your rough draft you have simile, metaphor, and personification, I might kind of go, I think you could come up with some other stuff. Those are all pretty similar to one another. But you can take multiple types of figurative language. Right. Any questions?
So we're not using figurative language, or just not recommended?
I don't want you are not to use the term figurative language for any of your body paragraphs because it's just too broad. But you can certainly use a specific type of figurative language for a body paragraph. So there have been instances before where, Ben refuses to listen to me and writes, has personification, has a symbol, and has a simile all in one paragraph, and it's just too loose. There's just too much stuff going on. But as long as you choose a type of figurative language to focus on, you would be okay. All right? But you're not going to use the phrase, the term, figurative language really anywhere within your essay. And next week, probably around Tuesday, not that I'm waiting for you until Tuesday night to start writing the essay. I'll give you another little paper, a little half the one that you have that has some tips on it. I didn't want to give it to you right away because I don't want you to struggle per se, but I want you to kind of start working on it, thinking some things out, and then I'll give you some ideas to maybe hopefully fine tune your rough draft. What sentence do we have to nail for any essay to work? You gotta have a good thesis. So when it comes to rhetorical analysis, which is the type of essay we're doing, we have a surefire way to have a successful thesis statement. And you'll find out I like mnemonic devices, so we have diddles, now we have to have another one. Ben's favorite place to go after school.
Bad.
He likes to go to the spa.
And this is for our thesis.
This is for your thesis statement. It's a math problem. S plus P plus A equals thesis. Ben, that's my Walt Disney font.
That is good.
Yeah, that is actually pretty good. Let's see.
Any guesses as to what they stand for? This is an actual acronym. Spell's a real word. Yeah, that's not it.
Spectacular.
Okay, I have the first three words.
Strategies. And by strategies, we mean rhetorical strategies, rhetorical devices. So we're talking about diddles at that point. And I know you haven't looked at any formal AP prompts. We spend a lot of time working on rhetorical analysis because I kind of look at it as being the main building block throughout much of the course. When you take the AP exam, you have to write 3 essays in 2 hours. One of your essays is going to be a rhetorical analysis. Sometimes they'll say locate the rhetorical devices. Sometimes they'll say identify the elements of language, identify the rhetorical strategies, identify the literary strategies, rhetorical techniques. They're all the same thing. We're talking about strategies, we're talking about diddles, we're talking about rhetorical devices when we say strategies. We also, and I know I'm skipping one, we have to also identify, and this is not author, but you always have to identify, and we did this yesterday, the author's close. Save that one for later. Argument. And then the P is purpose. The purpose is always going to be a 1-word verb. So it literally is a sentence where these are your strategies, this is the nouns, these are the subject of the sentence, this is the verb, and then this is the object of the sentence that it's explaining. It's okay, Maria, that you look a little confused. We're going to figure it out.
Yeah, you're gonna elaborate on it.
You go in backwards order. Argument, purpose, strategies. So what were some arguments that we were taking a look at yesterday? Or what are some potential arguments that are going on in the book that Steinbeck's trying to convey?
The socialism, spread of the ideology.
Okay. You just want to say the spread of socialism?
Sure.
And again, this is an example. We'll go green. Socialist, we said ideology, I think, yesterday.
Yeah.
What's my least favorite word? Show. We're not going to use show. Therefore, we're not going to use demonstrate, because that's basically the same thing. What would be some verbs? And Sam, what was the attitude that was kind of going along with socialist ideology? Okay, so what would be some verbs that would kind of have a positive, potentially positive connotation to them? Okay. And again, we're brainstorming, so if we don't keep, I'm not saying it's bad. If we don't keep it, no problem, because we want to come up with as many options as we can. Express. I don't mean the word push because I think it's too colloquial, slangy, but if you're really trying to push an idea across, what would be some verbs that you could use? Enforce? You will take the socialist thought, no matter what. Insinuate? You trying to trick me with spelling?
I don't know how to spell it.
I think I spelled it correctly.
I think that's right.
That's how I would spell
I'm a
it.
terrible speller. I acknowledge that. Don't feel bad if you correct me. Think of an A term. What was it? No. I'm trying to push an idea across.
Advance.
Yeah, advance could go.
Acknowledge. Isn't that weird?
I was still thinking ADV.
Advocate.
Advocate. Bethany. Yeah. He's going to do that this year, I can tell.
Could you say like it was just
And actually, these would all be expresses, enforces, advocates. We would change the tense of the verb a little bit.
Could you say what's the word? Tries to appeal the spread of socialism to the reader. Could you say something like that? Or along those
In
lines?
theory, you could. think this was 7th period I said this to. I forget stuff, so you're in 7th, that's fun. In your course syllabus where there's like the writing, the sample essay outline kind of thing, and not that you have to always do this, but next to thesis statement I put simple so far as a sentence, not meaning simplistic, but I think you want your thesis sentence to be as direct as possible. What some people will start to do is get a little too wordy when they don't know what to write. I'll just write more junk, and then pretty soon the focus kind of starts to disappear. So you might expand upon that later. Or what was it appeal? No, appeal. So you might later on kind of get into the body paragraphs if this could appeal to people of the working class or those who have been disenfranchised or whatever the case may be. But I don't want to have too much stuff going on in my thesis. All right. But they're all one-word verbs, and they're all a heck of a lot better than show or demonstrate.
Is the word that you were thinking of up there?
Yeah, advocate.
Oh.
That was one up. And again, we said advocates, expresses, and all that kind of stuff. So now, what I'm doing is I've identified, this is my argument, the spread of socialist ideology. We'll go with advances. I don't want to pick the one that I've said, so we'll do that one. I need to put an S on it. Advances. Now I would need rhetorical devices. Here is the tricky part of a rhetorical analysis essay. People are very good at coming up with arguments. People get to be pretty good at coming up with purposes to arguments. People are good at coming up and identifying rhetorical devices within a book. Well, what do your rhetorical devices have to do? Help explain how Steinbeck advances the spread of socialistic ideology. So you could go, there's some great imagery about the land in like chapter 1. Or there's some great description in chapter 9 about the belongings that have to be left behind by migrants who are going west. There's great imagery about the fruit being burned in chapter 23. But do those examples of imagery help advance the spread of socialist ideology? That's the question that you have to ask yourself. So you can find devices, but you want to make sure that those devices are going to reinforce the argument that you are trying to get across. And I said this is why you want to work backwards. If someone starts with their rhetorical devices, then they have to come up with a purpose and argument that fit those devices. You could have like 3 different arguments going on for the devices, the examples that you have in mind. You're better off starting with the argument, then coming up with a purpose. What I would do, and this isn't part of the thesis, I would then go through the book and try to find where those examples really are, and then once I know what parts of the book, the passages, the examples, the details that I want to use, all right, now what is going on here from a literary standpoint? Is he making allusions? Is he using irony? Is there some kind of paradox going on? Is there, you wouldn't say socialistic diction, but is there like community diction or unifying diction that's being used to kind of spread that thought? That's the tricky part, is getting the devices that align with the argument that you're trying to do. That's where the work part really kind of starts to come in. So obviously, not everyone is going to do the spread of socialist ideology. Maybe Sam decides to. I'm not holding you to the devices that you're going to use. But what are 3 potential rhetorical devices that you think you could use? Okay. I'll change colors for this one.
You could use facts, because it talks about like what actually happened.
Okay, so like the details.
Yeah.
Diction.
What kind? Can't just say diction.
Supportive diction.
That's a general term. Here are terms that tend to be, and supportive doesn't really get used a whole lot, so it's still good you said it. Folks will use like strong diction. I don't really know what a strong word is compared to like a weak word or something like that. You want to have an adjective that really kind of identifies the type of language that's getting used. And obviously that's easier to do when you have specific words already in mind that you would want to use. But you could use a type of diction, but we would just need something. If you were to do like the spread of socialist ideology, There's a very specific A device that I would probably end up using for it. And I think you could. Kara, were you talking about the IOB chapter yesterday? Did you mention that one? Where the pronouns get used? Did we talk about that yesterday? IOB? That might have been a fourth period thing. Again, someone sitting back there said something about it. Remember there's a chapter where it talks about there's a shift from I to we?
Oh, yeah.
It's chapter 14. In that chapter, there are very specific allusions. Makes references to Jefferson, Marx, Paine, Lenin. These were radical.
Marxist.
So in that case,
Marx was a Marxist. He
He
might have been. He could be correct with that. Revolutionaries, radical thinkers, and things like that. But you have, specific allusions being made. Remember I said this is a sentence. We'll have to put the word and here. What is my thesis statement now? Imagery, details, and allusions. Actually, it would be advanced, because I have plural compound subject, my fault. Imagery, details, and allusion advance the spread of socialist ideology. That's my sentence. What's not in my sentence? Don't say period, we can add that later. But what are some things that aren't in the sentence that people would probably include? Well, yeah, show. What'd you say? Book name as well as. Why don't I have to include the book name? It's already in the introduction. It should be there at least. Have identified what it is I'm taking a look at. I had my attention grabber, I transitioned into the book and the author, I'm giving you background, now I'm getting into my thesis. A thing that a lot of people will still add, a phrase to the beginning of this, will go, they want to put something in front of imagery, details, and illusion. Yeah, that'd be one. Okay, say I do that. Through imagery, details, and illusion.
And add like Steinbeck advances the.
If I do that, what now becomes the subject of my sentence? If I go the author or Steinbeck. The subject of my sentence is now Steinbeck. I know this sounds silly. I don't want the subject of my sentence. I don't want the subject of my paper to be Steinbeck. I want the subject to be, what are my body paragraphs about? Imagery, details, illusion. I'm focusing on the details as the main point. Now, within my body paragraphs, I might do something. Steinbeck advances this idea through his use of illusions and whatnot. It's not that you can't ever use Steinbeck, but it's unnecessary. It's words I don't need. It helps keep the thesis focused, simple. Here's the other thing if you get in the habit of it down the road. You have to write 3 essays in 2 hours on an AP exam, which is months away. What do you want to conserve?
Time.
Words, because saving words saves time. So if you can get the point across without having to do all that stuff, you're okay. We are going to talk about chapter 5 tomorrow. Dan, did you have something?
No, I'm good.
You sure?
Yeah.
So the hope is at least now you have an idea as to a thesis statement to come up with. And I know my first body paragraph is going to be imagery. I know my second body paragraph is going to be details. I know my third body paragraph would end up being about illusions.